Welcome to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs program featuring conversations about life in the central San Joaquin Valley. This program is brought to you in partnership between KFSR 90.7 FM and CMAC Fresno. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Today, we're going to be talking to two attorneys, Alexander Martin and Cadee Ohanesian. Both practice law here in Fresno. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
So is it safe to say that you're both defense lawyers, or do you do other things?
Our primary practice is criminal defense. Occasionally we'll take other cases, personal injury cases, or sometimes workers' comp, sometimes immigration issue, very little bit of family law.
So you let the bad people go. Do you hear that often when you go out in public? And
I've never heard that.
Never heard that?
No, that's what they always say. We let the bad people go. If we let the bad people go, then we're winning every case. That's obviously not the case. And a lot of times you're not dealing with whether or not the person is a bad person. It's just whether or not they made a bad decision and what we can then do with that bad decision.
So when someone gets charged with a crime, all of a sudden, do you find people accuse that person right away? That person is guilty, that person is guilty?
Well, how can you not? You turn on the news, this person just got arrested, this person just did this, and then you meet that person in court or you meet the person in the jail. They're in handcuffs, they're in prison garb. They don't necessarily look clean. So obviously the society is going to look at them like they did something wrong. And now it's our turn, Cadee and I, to actually come in and say, wait, there may be something we need to do. We need to investigate a little, kind of look at what really happened here.
Cadee, when you get a case, what's the first thing you do?
I try to introduce myself to the client and get to know my client a little bit on a more personal level regarding his family, his or her family, just different things about their life. And then I review the discovery, which is most commonly police reports, with my client, and we talk about those things. And the police reports are not always 100% accurate, so I like to go over the reports with my client and then get their feedback on their opinion of what happened and where things may be a little bit different.
And it'll take a while. Well, they'll actually be in the system, our clients. If they're in jail, sometimes they get let out because of the crime or their history. But there'll be a time where we have to be visiting them in jail, and they're looked at as this bad, just as you said, evil person. And the toughest part is then going and meeting the community who's not used to seeing people handcuffed, and we have to now show to them that they're still human. And I think Cadee actually does a pretty good job of that when she's picking the jury.
You're going the direction I want to go next, jury. So you've looked at the evidence. Is there another step before you go to the jury, or you immediately go to the jury?
Once we've actually gotten the evidence from the district attorney's
Yes.
office, well, there's some investigation, talking to our client, some strategy. But once the jury starts, yeah, we're going to the jury. We're talking to the people and seeing how they feel about a certain issue.
Well, there's also the arraignment, the preliminary hearing. There are other hearings before trial. It's not just arraignment and then trial. There's a lot of things that happen between those two phases.
So let's talk about the jury now, because a lot of people try to get out of jury duty. You know, we have friends or we have family members that say, I'm going to make up a story and I'm going to get out of jury duty. But when you two are looking for a jury, what are you looking for? Are there key words, or what is it that you're looking for?
I have no idea what I'm looking for. And I feel like I get it wrong every time. She just does that right.
Every case is different. There's no such thing as a perfect 12 people for every single case. So you want to take into consideration when you're looking for your perfect jury, your client's defense, the ethnicity of your client, the race, the sex, all those things about your client. And then I like to watch the jury all the time from the moment they come in till they're sitting there answering our questions. I want to know if they know somebody else in the audience, or if they are friendly with a deputy or somebody else, because those things matter when they go in to deliberate. If my best friend and I went into the jury room and we disagreed, I'm not going to fight it. It's not worth losing a friendship over. So I don't want two best friends on a jury, because they'll go together. And I mean, there's so many things that you have to look at.
But there are people who say, when I get called in the jury box, I'm going to say, I hate criminals, or I'm going to say I'm extremely conservative, lock him or her up. I mean,
That's
can you
the
see
worst
through
thing to
that?
say.
Can you see through that?
I think that's the worst thing to say, because the judges, the judge runs the courtroom. There's a deputy, the DA. Everybody kind of roots for the DA anyway. So by saying I hate criminals, I want him locked up, the DA is going to be like, yes, we're keeping this guy. Then you have to show cause why they would be removed from the jury. They're actually better off saying, I think he's innocent. They will get kicked off a jury faster by going down that road than the I believe they're guilty, put him in jail forever road.
Alex, let me ask you, do people understand, do you think the average person out there understands the court proceeding and the process? I mean, do people really understand what's going on?
Well, I don't know if the average attorney even understands the process. I've gone in there and made some mistakes, but that's the point. We as attorneys are trying to learn exactly what the process is for every specific client. There's different rules for different crimes, for different people, for different ethnicities that have to safeguard, based on our Constitution, to safeguard these individuals. And it becomes a balancing act of defending your client and communicating to the community what the actual laws are. Everybody watches Law and Order and everybody thinks that's what it is. But if it happened on Law and Order, then it must be true, and that's something that they need to show to me. And it hurts both the defendant and the prosecution. On the defense side, everyone assumes we're hiding something. We have some smoke screens. We're going to just keep everything away from them. We're just going to lie to them. As my daughter would tell everybody when I was younger, she told everybody I was a liar. She couldn't pronounce lawyer. Maybe she was right. I don't know. But that's the image that we're actually portraying and that people take. So we have to present to them, no, there's other laws, there's safeguards, and we can't just come in and lie to you. We're presenting the evidence best way for everybody. It's difficult. It's very difficult. Do
we need defense attorneys? I mean, some people always say, defense attorneys, we don't need them. The world would be better without them. And I'm sure you've heard it as defense attorneys.
It's laughable. Do we need defense attorneys? Obviously, if you're a victim, you would say no. I've been a victim. She's been a victim. Obviously, when that happens, you think, no, we don't need defense attorneys. Just lock them up. Let's just get to that point. But without defense attorneys, really, you can't lock anyone up. You can't do anything. It's part of the process, and it's the best way we can ensure that the right thing happens, or all sides are being spoken by the indigent, by the defendant, by the government.
So, Cadee, I want to ask you about self-defense.
Okay.
Everybody has an idea of what self-defense is, and I'm sure you run across this every time when you're dealing with clients. One thing I've heard is shoot the criminal outside, drag him inside, and say that he was in your house or she was in your house. I mean, we joke about that, but there are people that think that. So let's talk a little bit about self-defense.
Self-defense is a defense that is applicable in most assault and battery cases. The trick about self-defense that people don't understand is you're only allowed to use the amount of force that's being used on you. So if I punch you in the face,
or if I were to punch her in the face,
I'd love to punch
that
him
would be
in the
interesting.
face. Then I can't shoot him. If he punches me in the face, I can only punch him back. I can't then shoot him. If he has a deadly weapon, then I can use a deadly weapon back. But as soon as he drops his gun, I in essence have to drop mine too.
And could there be a time where you go overboard? Like, let's say he's got a gun against you, and somehow that gun gets dropped, and then you shoot him.
That's the complication. Sometimes you think yourself, I have a right to defend myself. I think she has a gun, but in reality, I could be intoxicated, and she's holding a stick, and maybe she came to visit somebody else who lives at my house, and I thought she was a burglar. Those are the imperfect parts of self-defense, where somebody is mistakenly believing something, and what ends up happening is, as defense attorneys, we come in and explain that there was a situation, maybe this individual was defending another person or defending themselves from something that wasn't real, but it was more to, when we go into the courts to explain, hey, maybe something else happened here, and we can kind of minimize that.
The other day I was watching the news, and I heard that someone had taken a shotgun and shot at the person who was stealing his car. Now, everybody in the room cheered and said, oh, I hope they shot him, I hope they shot him. But the question is now, let's talk about the law. If I see someone breaking into my car, can I shoot him or her?
It depends.
I'm going to go ahead and say no.
Right.
We have some disagreements on San Joaquin Spotlight.
Well, I would say it depends on whether or not that individual has a gun. You probably shouldn't be approaching a robber. Call 911, obviously. But if you're in an area where you can't leave and you're approaching an individual and they have a gun, it's possible that force can be used. You would obviously say no, maybe.
And let's talk about why you would say no, Cadee.
Well, if they're breaking into your car, and I'm assuming your hypothetical did not include that you were in fact in the car.
No, you're in your living room and you hear the window crack and you hear your alarm and you go run out there with your shotgun.
I would run out there with a shotgun. Whether or not I would shoot the person is a different story. They're not harming my person or another person, so I don't have a self-defense against others' defense. He's not using any deadly force on me, and he's not threatening me. If he turned around and had a handgun or a shotgun and threatened me, well, then yes. But from what you've told me, he doesn't have a weapon. He's just breaking into your car, so I think shooting him would be a little bit overboard.
So what's the general advice you give clients or you tell family members or somebody about force and when it's used?
Stay out of trouble and stop fighting is what I would say. Maybe stay away from the drinking parties. But it's just one of those things. If you're thinking about whether or not you can use force, just get out of there. You already have enough time to just figure it out. Nobody needs to be macho and let's fight everybody. And that's what a lot of our cases end up being. One person does one thing, another person trumps it, and we keep going back and forth. Just try to stay away from that trouble. Maybe don't go to that party.
You know, you mentioned party, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I want to talk about driving under the influence. First question, do you think people realize how dangerous driving under the influence is out there?
No.
I don't think they do.
And I mean, so what? Sometimes I hear people say, "Oh, I can drive," but they've had 2 beers. Sometimes I've heard people say, "I can drive," and they've had 1 beer. I mean, is there a rule or the golden rule that we're looking for?
You know, I think what we're supposed to say is if you've had anything to drink, don't drive at all. I agree with that. I think that we have, especially right now, a really horrendous case where a guy chose to drink and drive and he killed his 2 best friends.
Oh.
So anytime you have something to drink, I would say the best advice is don't drive at all. Other than that, it's just, it's a personal thing. He can probably drink a lot more than I can.
She's saying I'm heavier than she is.
I did say
And that's
that,
the
yeah.
reason.
I mean, we say that with a smile, but does that factor in? I mean, I've got a big stomach on me, but does that mean that I can take more drinks, or would you prefer that I just anytime I have a beer?
Well, it
not
definitely
drive?
does. You know, you and I go out, we have a couple beers, we're not counting, we're watching some kind of sporting event, and we may be okay. Whereas my sister comes with us, she's about 120 pounds, 2 beers, and she's probably intoxicated because of her levels, because she weighs less. So 1 beer for you is not the same as 1 beer for another person. I'm with Ms. Ohanesian. If you can't, if you're drinking, don't drive, and then you don't have to worry about that issue.
How expensive is a DUI? Because I hear out there that there's insurance implications, there's driver's license implications, there's this whole other hearing that the DMV conducts. So let's take a DUI step by step.
Okay. When you are cited for DUI, you'll get a temporary license. It's pink paper. You have 10 days from the date of the issuance of that to request a DMV hearing. If you don't do that, then your license becomes suspended for DUI. So depending on how important your license is, you want to make that phone call within 10 days and get the DMV hearing set. Then your license will stay good. The temporary license will stay good until the DMV renders a decision. The DMV hearing is, it's an administrative hearing. The DMV officer is the prosecutor, the judge, and a lot of times testifies for the officer against the defendant. So it's pretty outweighed. I've actually seen an officer sustain their own objection.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's weird.
It's a different ballgame.
But
And then you have the other game, which is the criminal courtroom.
So what happens at the DMV hearing if the judge says, you know what, this case is bogus?
Then your license is reinstated.
But that doesn't affect your criminal case.
Correct.
You could still have a criminal case. And we have many clients that have that issue. They think that since the DMV has said that there's no issue, that there isn't an issue at all with any other government agency, and you still have the court system.
It sounds like DUIs, someone gets pulled over with a DUI, there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of just headaches. So, the advice you give, don't drink and drive, period, would probably be the best way.
Definitely, and this is all assuming that they even lived. There's people, dying almost every day from DUIs. Recently in Fresno County, there was the Perla Vasquez case where she went down for murder with previous DUIs, and a lot of people don't know that or understand that. We try to advise our clients that it's not only dangerous and you will have larger legal repercussions, I mean, you could die, and that's something that we can't ignore.
Is it happening a lot, though? Are people getting a lot of DUIs? I mean, is this happening? Is this a problem in our community?
Yes.
It is a problem in our community, and I think that it's a problem in our community for a lot of different reasons. I think number one, we're a college town. Fresno State, Fresno City, Fresno Pacific, even, Reedley and even Madera and Merced, I think. There's a lot of college students here, and I think that contributes to the number of DUIs. I think it's hot. I think that contributes to a lot of DUIs, but I think I think that it's higher than it is in some places because of the colleges.
Cost. Let's talk about the cost of a DUI. I mean, you're not only talking, you may lose your license, you're not only talking the increase in the insurance, but there's some fines. Talk about that.
Well, the fines, depending on how many prior convictions you have, they hover around $2,000. You have DMV restrictions, so you can't go to work, or sometimes you can go to work, but that may affect your income. You have to do a class. That class costs money. After so many DUIs, you're looking at over a year-long class, which you have to be paying every single time you go, possibly missing work. Your insurance rates are going to go up. You may not even get certain jobs, and there's certain jobs out there where if you did get a DUI, truck drivers, you're not working anymore. The cost is extremely high, assuming you're still around after the DUI, and a lot of people don't factor that.
I would like to mention, though, that the county is offering a program now. It's called Scared Stiff, I think. It used to be called Scared Stiff. And it only used to be a program that if you were 24 years old and under, if it was your first DUI, you could do this one-day program, Scared Stiff. From my understanding is they take you to a classroom and you watch videos of car accidents and you learn through it like that. And if you complete that class, by the time the court tells you, they'll reduce your fine in half. They now offer that class to all first-time DUIs, but you kind of have to ask for it. So it would be a good thing to...
And that's the class where you're watching accidents and all that stuff. So that's a gruesome class.
Really gruesome class. You're seeing what the actual effects of the way a person looks if they were to pass away in a car accident, which is not necessarily shown to the community.
There's this misconception, or maybe it's reality. You two can help me with that. Lawyers are rich. You make a ton of money. You win one case and you become a millionaire. I mean, I know I'm exaggerating too, but there are those people who think that just because you're a lawyer, you're making nothing but money. Talk about that.
Well, they're not factoring our student loans. So Uncle Sam wants a lot of money from me every month. We have to pay office, we have to pay staff, we have to pay a licensing fee. There's a lot of costs involved with being a lawyer. A lot of your life gets put on hold, 7 years of schooling, as you know. And I think people don't factor that in, especially like Cadee and I, we got into criminal defense, and a lot of the times you're representing indigent clients, poor clients. I was a public defender for several years, and it was more the thrill of actually helping people than it was making money, because we weren't making money then, It takes some time to actually build that practice, and Cadee's done a good job of that.
I think that it's a huge misconception, especially for the criminal defense attorneys. There are very lucrative areas of the law. Criminal defense is not one.
Talk about how do you make it so that things aren't personal? I mean, you might have a client that your heart goes for. But then you realize, you know what, I have to keep this professional because, this person did something silly or stupid. I mean, how do you keep things professional and not get tied into the emotions?
That's a really hard one. Some of our cases are very long cases. We
You build a
We're-
relationship with the client.
we travel all the time.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we're meeting people in their kitchens, in their living rooms. The family, the grandparents, the children. I mean, everybody in the family, and it's really hard.
And-
They have our cell phone numbers. They call us. They text us. They email us all the time, and it's really hard to not make a personal connection.
Because ultimately what we're doing is affecting not only them, their children, their family, it's affecting everybody.
There are times where you watch these programs like Dateline or even the news locally, and the verdict comes out and guilty, and you see the defense attorney sometimes put his head down or her head down. I mean, when those decisions come out, what are you two thinking, and how do you stay composed?
I think it's hard. A guilty verdict for any attorney, defense attorney, is really hard. I immediately think, okay, what did the jury not hear? What did they not get to see? What was kept out in a motion in limine? I kind of want to know what happened. The standard that we have for criminal defense is reasonable doubt, and that's a really high standard. So when you hear that it's a guilty verdict, you think, something maybe was left out in a motion in limine, or you know what, sometimes maybe that was just the right verdict.
Right, I was going to add, sometimes we, as Katie said, we think, what did the jury not hear? But then sometimes when the jury does come back guilty, I think to myself, and we think, what did I not hear? Maybe I didn't get it. I think a lot of people automatically assume that the defense attorney knows that their client is guilty, and they're defending them anyways, and that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of clients that get appointed to us, they won't speak to us. They just absolutely refuse to speak to us, and may not necessarily want to tell us everything that's going on. So we don't know what happened. Obviously, with clients that are retained, they're a little more on our side to want to help, but we don't necessarily know what happened either. So a lot of times we are just sitting there thinking, what happened? I don't know.
This may be a tough question, but is there room for theatrics in the courtroom? Because sometimes you hear these lawyers go in there and they're talking with their hands and they're, being real loud, and, then you have the ones that are very cool, they're in there with their expensive suit and, they're real mellow. So theatrics, does that come into play?
I wouldn't say theatrics to the point where you're trying to confuse anyone, but when you're sitting there for days listening to DNA evidence or
Sounds like fun.
or all these photographs of a wall and we can't tell if it's the left wall or the right wall, it starts to get a little boring and the jury starts to fall asleep and everybody needs some entertainment. And it's not theatrics necessarily, it's just a little comedy, a little character we're adding to the game.
Talk about how you get your clients. I mean, is it all word of mouth, or back in the days there were phone books, now things are changing, but how do clients find you?
Everybody loves her and they tolerate me.
I have been fortunate enough to get most of my clients word of mouth. I do have a contract position in Madera, and I get appointed on cases in Madera, but for the most part, my practice has been all word of mouth.
Every case that comes your way, do you take it, or are there ones that you just say, you know what, I don't want to mess with this case?
It's not a matter of wanting to mess with the case. We don't take every case that comes into our office. There are a lot of factors. You have to be a good fit with your client. If your client and you don't get along from the very start, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. And you have to be willing to put the money aside and say, this isn't a good fit, and if it ends in, the last thing you want to do is fight with your client. I mean, there's enough battling with the district attorney's office and the courtrooms. You don't want to be fighting with your client.
And sometimes what they need isn't a lawyer. Sometimes they just need some documents filed or just to be pointed in the right direction. Sometimes they need therapy, and we can't necessarily provide that. And it's really just, I'm fighting with somebody, but it's not an issue of law.
Believe it or not, we're running out of time here on the program, so we have one more question I'm going to ask. Both of you can answer it, and then we'll call it a show. But Why do you do this? I mean, this is tough work. You have tough cases, families are involved, it depends on the case, a lot of emotion. Why do it?
I don't know that there's a defense attorney out there that hasn't asked that question probably every Monday and said, why do I do this? Why am I walking into a courtroom where I'm standing next to the one person that everybody hates and everybody just wants to destroy and throw away and says, forget it, lock him up, throw away the key. And then that's what reminds me, that's why I'm doing it, because everybody wants to lock that person up and no one really even knows what happened. Everyone just sees a person wearing handcuffs, prison garb, maybe there's a tattoo, and we automatically assume that person's guilty. And since I feel like I'm the only person in the room that maybe doesn't always feel that way, I feel like I have to keep doing it.
Cadee, same question to you.
I do it because I really like it. I love being a lawyer, and I love being a criminal defense attorney. I love being in court. I couldn't stand sitting at a desk all day. And it's the kind of law that allows me to keep my own schedule. I do have a family, so I can make my own schedule and be in court or on vacation whenever I want to be. So it is flexible. I do actually become quite good friends with a lot of my clients, and I like that too. They're very appreciative, and it kind of makes you feel like you're actually accomplishing something.
Well, both of you, thank you so much for being on the program this week. Good luck to you in your law practice.
Thank you.
Sevag.
That's all for this edition of San Joaquin Spotlight. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. We just got done listening to an interview with two local lawyers, Cadee Ohanesian and Alexander Martin. Thank you to the volunteer crew that made this and every production possible. We couldn't do this show without you. Thank you to our audience members listening on 90.7 FM KFSR Fresno and those of you watching on CMAC. Tune in next week to a new edition.